I can hardly believe it, but we are about to hit 2,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, and we'll probably hit 2,000 already by the time this is uploaded. But thank you guys so much for the support over the last like 7 years I've been doing YouTube. So as you can tell, my rate of growth has been absolutely astronomical, but we have officially hit 2K. So thank you guys for all the support, and without you guys, I physically couldn't put £10 a month of fuel I get from ad revenue into the car, so thank you, I guess. But anyway, of course I do this because I enjoy doing it and not because of the money, because of the severe lack thereof money. But I just enjoy sharing my cars with you and showing you guys what I'm doing with my cars. So in the meantime, I've also owned this beast for just over 2 years now, and I thought I'd warn you guys about some things you have to check before you buy an R35 Nissan GTR. Another reason you're going to want to subscribe is because we are T-minus 8 days until my GTR goes into Lichfield for some insane tuning, because we're going to be pushing over another 120, 130 horsepower over what it is currently pushing, and it is going to be a different car in under 2 weeks time. So you're going to want to stay subscribed for that, because it is going to be absolutely epic, and I'm so excited. Literally the last like 4 nights in a row I've dreamt I'd pick the car up after it was tuned. Not that I'm sad or anything, but I'm genuinely that excited to get the car tuned. It's been a couple of days since I cleaned it, but I wanted to walk over the paintwork and show you guys what it looks like. Despite being under a tree, the finish on it is actually looking really nice. So I did a pretty long auto gleam exterior detail on this. I used snow foam, a pressure washer, I did magma, which is liquid clay. I also used Autosol on the exhaust, which is like a chrome cleaner to make it all nice and shiny, to get all the soot off of it. We also used tar removers to get any of the black tar marks off the side of the car. We used the magma on the alloy wheels to get them back to their lovely factory looking paint finish. But yeah, if you want to see a picture of all the products, I've flashed that up on the screen now. But basically I used all of those to get the paint back to factory as best I could without a full respray, because let's face it, 60 quid's worth of car cleaning stuff is a significantly better deal than spending all that money on a respray or even a full detail. I also used hand wax and polish on the car to get rid of some of the minor scratches that were in the paintwork from just day-to-day use, and I think it looks absolutely fantastic. I'm really happy with how bright it came out. The only thing I didn't do is the glass, so I could do with some Auto Gleam Fast Glass to make that look a little bit better, but overall I'm absolutely chuffed with the finish on the paint. It just looks absolutely stunning again, and pretty much like it just rolled out the factory. And my neighbour's now got a TT as well, and I'm really jealous because it makes me miss my one. And he's got a cool number plate as well. Look at that. How are you finding the TT?
Oh, it's fucking sick.
I miss my one, I really miss it.
So much shit in the back of the car.
Oh, sick.
What? I put a 10-inch sub in the back.
See, that was necessary. Have you got the Bang Olufsen upgrade?
Yeah.
I had that as well, and I really thought it wasn't that great. Like, it needed more bass.
I was like, is this
yeah,
sub
I was 100%.
trash?
So yeah, a sub is a definite must-have in the TT.
That was absolutely the first thing I did.
That is sick. Yeah, but this was such a nicer spec than mine, because obviously I had the standard alloys in Ibis White, and it was so boring. But this is the S line as well, so it's got what, like 200.
Dream car since the 7th grade, so
yeah.
I was like, I gotta get literally top of the line spec.
See, I hated the 1st and 2nd gen. I absolutely hated them.
Yeah.
But when the 3rd gen came out, I saw the front end of it, and the really angular headlights.
So
it's so sick. It's like, it is genuinely the first. We've got a meowing cat there as well. Sick. But yeah, no, the front end on this TT is just amazing. I think they really changed how the TT it was in my mind, because I hated the 1st and 2nd gen.
The 1st gen was truly a woman's car.
Yeah.
The 2nd gen I liked. But
No, the headlights were disgusting. I think the 1st gen looked better than the 2nd gen.
No.
Yeah, no, I hated the 2nd gen, I think. But yeah, no, 3rd gen TT, it is a dream whip, 100%.
Yeah.
And obviously this one's quattro, and mine was front wheel drive, so this one's what, 220 horsepower?
Yeah, 220.
220, yeah, 220, so this is going to be...
some, like, the bangs it makes when it's popped.
Yeah, it pops and... I found that, mine pops and
Yeah,
bangs from factory pretty much. Yeah, they're just absolutely sick cars, and I genuinely really miss mine. So for any aspiring automotive enthusiasts, definitely first sports car material, 100%.
And then the second one, right there.
And then the mortgage for the second one. The first thing to note if you're considering an R35 GTR is whether or not you can afford it. Now there are loads and loads of factors that play into this, but basically when you look at your monthly repayments on the finance plan, or of course if you can buy it outright then you can afford it, but if you look at the monthly repayments on the finance plan, look at them and think, if I had to pay it twice over, could I afford it? Because if you're buying an older GTR, in terms of maintenance you could be spending up to that much money, and I've certainly been spending way more money than I thought necessary, or what I thought was going to be the expenditure cost of owning the car, but fortunately was able to keep it anyway. there's effectively two versions of the R35. There is what is known as the CBA, which is the 2008 through 2010 GTRs. Now these ones are renowned for having some issues with the transmission because the solenoid caps spin and then you sometimes lose entire gearing sets. It can be a real pain, and if you don't like fix the issue pretty soon after it occurs by flatbedding it and taking it to a specialist or to Nissan, it's going to cause thousands and thousands of pounds in transmission damage. This issue was pretty much rectified in all DBA GTRs, which is the second type of GTR, which is all GTRs post 2011. So some of the 2011 and 12 cars were slightly less reliable because their launch controls were damaging the transmission. So 2013 is officially when they finalised the transmission software and the launch control was a little bit more stable, and the car doesn't tend to grenade itself under launch like a lot of the older ones did. So if you're really concerned about reliability, I'd recommend paying the slight premium for the 2013 GTR. 0 to 60 is like half a second or over half a second shaved off the older one because of the revised launch control, and it's just a much more refined package where most of the issues with the GTR had been ironed out. Additionally, DBA GTRs like this one, so 2013 plus, all have 550 plus brake horsepower, so it is actually a more powerful car than the 490 found in most of the CBAs. After you've decided which version of GTR you want to buy, there are lots of checks you need to do when you get to it. I'm going to list some issues now that are going to be quite surprising to you. There's some obvious things like the brakes. The brakes are massive on the GTR. They're like 390mm front rotors, so they are huge with 6-piston Brembo calipers. So these things are expensive to replace. If there's any sort of micro fractures in the rotor cooling vents, this means they're going to need a replacement soon, but you can also tell by the size of the lip around the edge of the rotor. So check your discs, check your pads, and check they're not going to need replacing soon, because at an official dealer or at some decent third-party dealers, you're talking in excess of £2,000 for a brake disc and pad replacement on all four corners. That is very expensive, but obviously necessary when you're doing 200 mile an hour in a near on 2-ton car. So make sure your brakes are okay, because that could be an expense you incur early on if you're not careful when you're looking at the car. Ideally you want to jack the car up to see if there's been any changes to the car. I wasn't aware when I purchased this, but it actually had an aftermarket Y pipe in it from the day I purchased it. And while that made the car sound nicer and probably helped it exhale a bit and maybe develop a bit more power, I wasn't aware of it. I thought I had 2 more catalytic converters than I actually did. So check your exhaust, because they're often modified on these, and you sort of want an OEM one. Since then I've bought a full OEM system to have as a spare after I've upgraded it soon, so I've got a spare Y pipe, which is the mid pipe that was altered on mine. But check the exhaust and check the underside of it and compare it with an image on Google to check that the car is fully stock. You also want to check the engine bay as well and make sure the air intake boxes are there, because obviously a lot of people put aftermarket cone air intakes on these to produce more power. Now another expense is tyres. A lot of people will say, oh yeah, they're fine, the tyres they're selling it with have got 50% wear on them. But from factory, GTRs run a lot of camber on the wheels to make it grip better around corners. Now while a lot of camber on the wheels A looks better and B helps with stability, it also means the inside of the tyre tread wears out incredibly quickly on the GTRs. And mine were, even though they looked fine upon initial inspection, were virtually bowled upon purchase. I mean, I rode on them for about 6 months, and as the wire was showing, I replaced them, so that was really cutting it fine. But basically what you want is, when you have it aligned and optimised, have it optimised for street use, which will lower the handling potential slightly, but improve the longevity of the tyres. And it depends what tyres it's running as well. So as standard, the GTR runs Bridgestone Potenzas, which are run flat tyres, very thick tyre sidewalls, very heavy, and the compound's also very hard. It means it doesn't grip that well, and in contrast with the Michelins that I've upgraded to now, they don't drive that well. But again, it depends what you want. If you want it to be OEM, of course Bridgestone Potenzas are an option, and the run flat capability is a nice option as well. But if you've got the EAA and you've got a flatbed available, if it does break down, put some non-run flat Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's, or if you can afford it, Pilot Sport Cup 2s on it, because they grip so much better. But be aware, a tyre replacement on the GTR runs north of £1,000, roughly £1,200 to replace all 4 tyres. And of course you at least need to replace them in axle sets because of the complicated 4-wheel drive system on the VR38 DET platform, because else you'll be putting unnecessary strain and wear on the differentials. Now if you plan on driving the GTR aggressively, which Of course you do. There's another caveat that you might need to be aware of, especially if you're in the European market. This doesn't apply to North American GTRs, but in Europe and I believe in Japan, so this is full JDM spec of course, in Europe and Japan they have something called a pedestrian safety system. Now what this is, I've explained before, but I'll explain it again quick because I've unfortunately incurred this massive expense. If you clip a curb or you put any pressure on the splitter at the front while driving, the car has an automatic system which effectively senses the impact, sets off the airbag ECU, but not the interior airbags if the crash isn't bad enough, and effectively triggers these things called hood pistons or hood rams, which are explosive charges that rip the bonnet off, break the hinges and turn the bonnet effectively into a trampoline. Now the reason it does this is so pedestrians don't get hit by the car and get a face full of exhaust manifold on top of the engine. Instead they get a face full of bouncy bonnet and fly off the car, and instead get a face full of concrete. Apparently that is safer, but or tarmac. Yeah, so apparently that's safer and is a mandatory thing to have on cars where the engine is so close to the bonnet here in Europe, and obviously because the engine is so large it's very close to the bonnet and effectively has to be turned into a trampoline for legal purposes. Now I got a quote from Nissan to repair this issue when it occurred. And just to replace, they said we have to replace the splitter, and obviously the charges are a one-time use, so you have to buy new explosive charges and import explosives, so you can imagine how expensive that gets. Yeah, so if you set the explosive charges off, Nissan will charge well over £10,000 for it. I think they said 11.5 to me for replacement and cosmetic repairs, and I was like, Jesus, that's mental. Luckily Litchfield, who I'm getting it tuned by and serviced by, came to the rescue, imported the parts from me from Japan and serviced and fixed the car for me, and replaced the airbag ECU for a low price of £4,500. And then my local paint shop, which I'm close friends with, did this for £500 for the respray on the front where I scuffed the splitter. So all in all it cost me dead on £5,000 to scuff the curb in it. So if you're going to drive it aggressively, be prepared for that lovely expense that could happen at any time. Of course, like any other car, when you start it up, check fluid levels, check what the temps get up to after a short drive. You know, make sure all the pressures are normal, but you can check all that using the gauge cluster on the interior of the screen, and just look at what all the temperatures and pressures are at. So they should be standard, and as standard they should be pushing around 13 pounds of boost under sustained load, so you know what numbers you're looking for when you're driving the car to make sure the boost pressure is working normally, there's no leak in the intercooler, and the pull should be really dramatic. And once you feel a really dramatic pull, you know that the car is running fine and running as intended. Now, other issues that I've encountered are my wheel bearing is going on my front driver's side wheel. These are being replaced, and the entire hub has to be replaced to replace the wheel bearings. We believe this is the issue and what the noises I'm getting, but I will let you guys know after my service is done in a week's time. So fingers crossed it's a wheel bearing, because I think they're only 600 quid for the whole front axle for both wheel bearings. But hopefully it's nothing like the differential or the axles, because they could get quite expensive. Another issue with GTRs is wheel clicking. Now this sounds really strange, but if you ever pull the wheel at an angle and you drive around corners in it, sometimes if the brake and the wheel isn't properly greased up in between each component before the nuts are tightened, the lug nuts or the wheel locking nuts, the wheels make a really weird clicking noise, almost like loose change. It sounds really alarming, but it's actually nothing to really worry about. And you can fix this just by putting an extra clip in the brake caliper, which costs £20. I did it for both axle sets and it was pretty damn cheap. But the clicking sounds really alarming, and if you're not prepared to experience it, you'll probably think the car's broken. But fortunately, literally taking the wheel and brake assembly off and a little bit of copper grease will get rid of this issue. And I've did it once and it's got rid of the issue for about 18 months for me. So all in all, it has been relatively cheap, if a little bit labour intensive, to get rid of the wheel clicking noise. So listen out for that when you take one on a test drive. Now they also have Bellhousing rattle issues, so this is where as the clutch engages, the bearings in the centre of it will get a little loose and the Bellhousing makes a bit of a rattly noise. Mine started to get a little bit rattly, and I believe the issue was much more prevalent on older cars, the CBA cars, but mine's been solid. And if you do need it replaced, Litchfield offer a replacement while you wait service for exactly £1,000 to replace the Bellhousing. But all these expenses are things you have to factor in, because I'm planning on probably doing the Bellhousing next year just for peace of mind. And then after sort of 100,000 miles, I recommend you have the engine refresh done, and Litchfield will do this for about £6,000. But you have to factor all these in long term. So all in all, I've spent £1,000 servicing it, £5,000 fixing it, £1,000 on tyres. In terms of other components, I've probably spent about another 300 quid on little things like the brake caliper clips. But all in all, you know, you spend way more than the X amount you're going to pay a month. For this, for example, £40,000, I pay around £750 a month, plus insurance and tax, so you have to factor it all in. I mean, I think roughly, including all of the stuff I'm doing to it at this point this year, including some minor upgrades like the stage remap we're doing with the exhaust and everything, I've spent around £1,500 to £1,800 a month on this car. Now, I know that's ridiculous, but you have to be prepared for those expenses when buying the car. Else, like the previous 5 owners of this car, despite only being 7 years old, and 2 years of the ownership has been me, you buy it, you drive it for a month, and you realise, oh, I need this done, I can't afford to have it done. And then you get rid of it, and that is such a shame. So I think when you're buying any really high-end car, remember it's not a 40 grand car, it's an 80 grand car with the running costs of an 80 grand car, but you're buying it for less than that. So yeah, running costs are extortionate on the GTR, and something you've definitely got to be aware of when buying one. But it's also a very reliable platform, especially when you look at the figures these things output. I mean, I'm going to be pushing nearly 700 horsepower in this thing, and all in all, the R35, especially the DBA onwards, are such a reliable platform to push that horsepower on. You regularly see examples with over 100,000 miles on them, and that's just unheard of in this space, because this thing's sort of Aventador quick after it's been tuned. At the moment it's Huracan quick, it's going to be Aventador quick, and it doesn't cost anywhere near as much to maintain or run as one of those. And you also never see examples of Aventadors or Huracans with 100,000 miles on, because people don't want to depreciate them, so you're never going to really learn how reliable those platforms are. But all we do definitely know is that the R35 DBA GTR is a very reliable platform, and I couldn't speak more highly of it, to be honest. I mean, I've put over 11,000 miles on it in my ownership, and there's been a few teething issues like the wheel bearing going and everything, and obviously fuel economy is horrendous, but that's what you expect for this sort of horsepower. It's a car that's just absolutely astronomically quick. You can scare the living hell out of people who haven't been in a fast car before, because it is unlike virtually everything else on the road, and it's just so tunable. The sky's the limit, the platform's reliable as a whole, and there's a few horror stories where people have had transmissions and stuff go, but as long as you've got sort of a fair few thousand put by in the event that bad things happen to the car, you're going to be okay. You know, it's a very reliable platform, and I couldn't speak more highly of how much I've enjoyed my ownership experience of the car. Stay tuned, because in a couple of weeks this thing is going to be even faster than it already is, which is just doesn't compute in my mind. I don't understand how something could be faster than this, but it will be, and faster and louder. It's going to be sick. I'm so excited, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in the next one, and I'll let you know a full video of all the running costs I've had over the 2 and a bit years of ownership experience at some point soon, and break it all down exactly for you guys, so you know, including tuning, running, fixing, insuring and taxing the car, and buying and financing it, all the money that I've thrown at this car to live the dream of owning an R35 GTR. Anyway guys, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.